Okay, everybody, so this is my spoiler review of episode 5 of Severance, the grim barbarity of optics and design. This is again directed by Aoife McArdle and written by Anna Monch. So, actually, my favorite moment in this episode is the amazing intro sequence here. I love the piano playing in the background. It sounds like something out of a Radiohead album, which I really appreciated, and it fit this scene so well here. Just eerie but tragic, and we see that Audi Helly recognizes again that she went up in the elevator, that she's hanging, and then we know both versions of Audi's are tough. They're gonna just fight to the death, literally, here. And the elevator ends up going back down. So it was a message that Helly was sending to her Audi, but I do believe that the worky Helly wanted her to go out like that. Like she says later in the episode that she wanted to be the one to tell her Audi self, like, I'm the one who, ended you. But it wasn't successful. But I love how Mark panics when he sees her in the elevator, and then the security guy just throws him in the elevator, and immediately he forgets when he gets up the elevator. I thought that was such a cool effect, and taking advantage of the awesome stuff they've already set up in this world. So again, just a great open. And it gets crazier because the next day at work, when he comes down the elevator, he immediately continues where he left off in panic. That's the cool thing about this show, is that even though they forget stuff when they leave, when they come back, it's like a continuation directly of where they left off. And I keep talking about all of the themes they got going out, just about corporate buildings we work in, how the corporate world functions, and the mess up stuff they do. You see more of that here, just where Mark's like, is she okay, Helly? Is she going to have time off? Are you going to let her go? And Harmony's like, her Audi has no intention of leaving. She'll be back at her desk in a few days. And he's like, is that enough time? So this is, again, something I think we can all relate to at the office, maybe even ourselves, where someone's suffering at work and they get little time off, and there's really not actual true care from the higher-ups about their well-being. It's just back to work as usual. And I know this took a while for me to just notice, but this clicked in my head just how many times, especially in this episode, they emphasized where the higher-ups and the security guy, everyone's saying their names with their last initial. So she's like, this happened on your watch, Mark S, and the security man later will say Helly R really intensely. So, it really lends to the theory in my head, like, okay, if they're really emphasizing that last initial, they wouldn't have to say that every time unless there wasn't other versions of them, whether it's a clone or it's just everyone who is a man, maybe, and the certain type of man in that building is named Mark, and they have to separate them, or vice versa, with Helly as the woman in the building. I'm not sure about that. It could be clones, who knows, but there's got to be super significance to why they have to emphasize the last name. Now, scene I also loved when Mark is reading Ricken's book, The You Are, again, in the bathroom, and we're getting the themes of the show here, but we're also getting some humor blended in. And I love the lines where Ricken writes, a society with festering workers cannot flourish. What separates man from machines is that machines cannot think for themselves. This was actually great and is so true. And he's talking about inspiring fellow soldiers at work by you making the leap, right? A good person will follow the rules. A great person will follow himself. Again, great stuff here. And we'll see this happen in this episode. And it happens both ways, because by Mark seeing Helly's behavior in the office, it is, in a sense, subconsciously inspiring him that something's up here, something has to change. So that will go the other way, too, where by the end of the episode, Helly is inspired by Mark. So it is really just rounded out really well with the themes they bring up, even in an episode, and getting payoff later on in the same episode. But when I'm talking about the humor, it is Ricken we're talking about here, who has a lot of humor in this episode. He's a great character. But the lines like, bullies are nothing but bulls and lies, and at the center of industry is dust. They can't crucify your hand if it's in a fist. Again, it's good stuff, but it's funny. It's funny how he's pointing it out in the words. I thought that was great. So we learned that Harmony hasn't told the board about what happens with Helly. And we also learned the security guy has given her the chip back. It's confirmed that PD's chip was messed with. It was reintegrated. But she doesn't want to show this to the board till she has everything she needs. She wants to know who did this. Now, this person has to be the person calling Mark with the blocked phone number. So that's going to be a big reveal of who's behind the kind of revolt here of the company. And Harmony's character got even more fascinating this episode, because she is not someone who is going to bow down to the people above her even. And she's starting to go her own independent way of the company's values, and more towards the values that she's justifying through Keir originally, and using a lot of his passages. So it's not for good. It's just a different way. It's her way. She is a rebel in her own sense, but I think she's actually going to end up being worse than even the people who are running the place now. Now, we see Mark is leaving from a panicky situation with Helly, and he's going to his Audi, and he's in another situation that's intense where he's got all these missed calls from Ricken, and his sister, Devin, is having contractions, and this baby's coming soon. And it's interesting where they are in this cabin at this big retreat, that they get this big map mark that he sees, and it reminds me even of the map a little bit of The Office, so they made a kind of a big point of that, so that had to mean something. And there's a lot of weird stuff going on in this retreat area with the cabins. There's more than meets the eye because when Devin goes to get coffee, she sees the other bigger cabin with this wealthier couple. And, she sees this pregnant woman named Gabby drinking coffee. She's all in white, but then we could assume as her husband is, but maybe not, but he's just a man all in white, and she yells for him, and he just runs away and goes off screen. So we don't even see his face. So something is up there. And there's a painting in their cabin that looks like a maze. So there's definitely going to be more with this Gabby character. And there is something about even where they are. I think there's just layers and layers to this show and starting to kind of hint at that. And I love that Ricken cries over Devin here and is like, I don't want to be like my father. That was great. And Ricken wants, he believes in telling a big secret for good luck, right, for the baby. And this leads to what I predicted that, was going to come up the book, that why didn't Mark reach out to them about the book? They were going to get curious about that. And he's heard about it. And then Ricken wants Mark's help to help him hang kelp. So I Googled hanging kelp. There's not really much on it. Sometimes it was to predict if it was going to rain or not, but that's really all I found. So it might just be something silly they're putting with Ricken. Who knows? And Ricken's obsessed now about knowing this book is missing. It's an advanced copy, right? It really is becoming his main annoyance, even though his wife's about to give labor. He's still so worried about it. And he's like, if the thief reads it, he will turn himself in at least. So that's an interesting line because it's just kind of playing on that. The people reading it at Lumon, the power of his book will get them to revolt, right? It's the same concept that it's going to change these people. It's a powerful book and changing you as a person, your philosophy. So we know Dylan and we know Mark are reading that book. So that's just going to add more and more to their workies and what they plan on doing. It's like the opposite of the Cure Bible for the higher ups. And little things are important too, even though it's kind of slower in the episode where his sister is, encouraging Alexa, her friend, for Mark still. And that's important because Alexa is going to be a key to Mark getting over his wife and the trauma he felt. And that's a key then for him to be more clear-headed and figure out what's really going on at Lumon. And you see he even says to Devin, I think Lumon might be up to something. You remember the businessman, meaning Petey. And then Devin starts contracting at that moment. And Mark's out. He starts thinking about Petey collapsing again and that blocked phone number ringing. So he's got to answer that phone to make that next leap and get out of denial, right? It's him breaking through the trauma of his wife. Instead of protecting that trauma and living with it, is letting it go, facing it. And then that's part of that is answering that phone, not using Lumon as a disguise from that anymore. And then you hear faintly that the baby is born as well. That was a big thing because they didn't show you that, but she did have the baby. Now, the hardest I laughed in this episode and in the show so far was when Milchek tells Mark, this is going to be the first time Helly is conscious as her workie. So he wants her to see everyone really happy, upbeat, no concern. Again, just speaking to how companies treat people who have suffering with mental health stuff. And he's like, I want you to make your eyes kind. Do you know how to make your eyes kind? Only Adam Scott could pull this off. The way he does it is so funny. And I love they even went back to it when he first sees Helly. He tries doing it. It's just hysterical. So what we're talking about with Harmony being rebellious here to her own company's values, she is having Miss Casey observe Helly and see for signs of sadness. But this is where Milchek's kind of like, why are you doing that? Like, that's against the book, and he's more to the book, Milchek, where he's getting wind of a lot of Harmony's just doing things on her own, which could be a problem for Harmony now, Milchek later on. But you'll see, Harmony says that to Milchek and the security guard. Both of them in this episode, she quotes a passage from Kier and is saying things like Virgin Rivers, like new ideas, new ways of doing things. She's doing it on her own merit here. And what I really like is how they revealed now a big answer for the show. So we're getting a lot of answers. Even though we get questions, we get an answer to reward us in the meantime, which is good, right? That's good mystery storytelling TV. And I love how they did this where Milchek knew that Irving was spending too much time with Burt and they were getting too close. So he has Irving discover the painting of the coup that supposedly happened with O&D. And the reveal of the whole episode is that they had the similar painting but different phones, right? Of MDR. So both departments are being brainwashed. It's like propaganda by the company to pin them against each other. They don't want these departments bonding together to have a chance of revolting against the higher ups. So they make up lies. So that's a cool reveal that no, there wasn't really a coup. There wasn't these crazy things these departments were doing that they were hearing about. They just didn't want any departments coming together. But you see, even the workers like, Miss Casey are for herself clearly and don't want to get in trouble because when Helly goes missing, that's the reason she tells Irv that Burt's in the conference room, because she knows that will distract whoever's watching from Helly missing, that she won't get in trouble. But the other twist is that Harmony was already watching anyway, and she let it go on. Because again, she has this chilling line where she's like, the surest way to tame a prisoner is let him believe he is free. So this is what I'm talking about, why I think she's getting to being worse than even the higher-ups at Lumon now. But where Mark starts to really sound like the values in Ricken's book is when he says to Helly, when she's talking about her outie, telling her she's not a person, he's like, don't focus on her. What do you want here? So he's, again, sounding like what he's learning from the book here. And also hypocrisy we see is that the handbook frowns upon colleagues being in relationships together, but you see that Burt and Irv are looking at that painting of Keir and his wife and how they met, and they actually did meet in Lumon, but they made it like they were bonded by the spirit of industry, which is ridiculous. So it's total hypocrisy, and they make up these values just so they can control people. Now, the thing that's going to get everyone going crazy on Reddit is this room of baby goats, and this guy is giving a goat milk, and he's like, they're not ready, give me time. And I like, they kind of had a meta thing here where Helly was like, making a theory of her own, like, is that what we're doing with the scary numbers? It probably isn't, but I think it also will be alluding to people saying stuff like that, but also that she's aware of it and the audience is clear aware of it, like, those scary numbers are doing something bad to something. Somebody, some type of creature or person, we just don't know yet, but it can't be the goats, but I think that's kind of the joke of it. But there will be some significance to that. But by the end, Mark wins over Helly here about the map, recreating Petey's map, and now they're kind of on the same page finally. And they've kind of inspired each other in a way to kind of start being more curious about what's going on with Lumon. But the interesting twist of it all is, again, that Harmony is letting them see other departments. She's got some bigger plan here. So it's interesting. What is Harmony's endgame? So we get this ending where now Burt introduces Dylan and Irv to the rest of the O&D department. And, that's why you see O&D scared of them too, because of the horror stories they hear about each other. But this is huge, and it even converted Dylan now that he's seen the truth. So it's exactly what Lumon doesn't want. They don't want these departments even becoming friends. And it's going to be interesting. I feel like they're setting up something tragic here with Burt and Irv, because too much is going in their way in a sense, and they're falling in love, and it makes you wonder if those two will even survive the first season. It might just be a sad ending for them. That's one of my main predictions right now, but we'll see. But I'm giving this one a 9.2. It wasn't as good as maybe the last two episodes, but it's still really solid. And it felt like kind of a transitional episode, meaning it was now setting up some new threads here and giving us new answers. And you're like, okay, now we're really going into like revolt setting up now of more awareness by our workers in Lumon. And we're getting more reveals about Harmony, and that there's going to be layers to this story and layers to this world, especially what's going on with that shady retreat with all the cabins. So we'll see. I'm still so hooked. I'm excited. This was still really great. Like I said, a 9.2. The writing is solid. The acting's amazing. The cinematography's still great. And I'm still on the edge of my seat the whole time. Let me know what you guys thought down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment, try to respond as many as I can. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews of Severance. I also do movie reviews, celebrity interviews as well. Please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for more of me. And I'll see you next time.